February 272 CE. Outside the ancient city of Antioch, a queen stands witness to the catastrophic collapse of her army. Expecting death to come swiftly, she braces herself. But Rome has devised a fate far more ruthless than the sword. Chains replace her crown, the grandeur of her court is exchanged for jeering crowds, and her suffering is meticulously crafted, not just as punishment, but as a powerful message broadcast to the world. This is not justice. This is Roman dominion in its most brutal, stomach-turning form. In the Roman worldview, military conquest did not end with victory on the battlefield. For captured rulers, especially women who once bore crowns, defeat marked the commencement of a torment far more calculated and devastating than mere execution. Roman law was unequivocal. Captives of war existed beyond the protections afforded to citizens or allies. The legal principle of jus gentium declared that military defeat stripped an individual of all freedom, rights, and status. The conquered were no longer sovereigns, subjects, or even recognized human beings with legal standing. They became property. When an army surrendered or a city fell, every inhabitant, regardless of rank, title, or innocence, belonged wholly to Rome. A queen who once commanded armies was no different under the law than a farmer or a child. None stood protected. Within the borders of Rome, citizens enjoyed layers of legal safeguards. Beating or executing a Roman citizen without due process could provoke public outrage and ruin careers. But these protections vanished at Rome's frontiers. Foreign captives had no shield against brutality. They could be beaten, sold, violated, or killed at the caprice of their conquerors, and the law offered no recourse. Royal blood counted for nothing once the shackles clicked shut. This harsh reality was ingrained in Roman identity from the earliest days. The 12 Tables, Rome's foundational legal code, explicitly stated that prisoners of war were the property of the state or were to be divided among victorious soldiers. Victory transformed human beings into spoils, prizes to be flaunted or discarded. For women of royal lineage, the crown that once commanded obedience became a hollow emblem, powerless against Roman chains. Ancient historians never sugarcoated these facts. Tacitus, writing of Roman campaigns in Britain, described with chilling clarity how Roman officials hesitated little before humiliating and abusing those who had once ruled. Defeat erased status instantly. Authority vanished the moment the Roman standards were raised over conquered land. Female captives faced an added layer of peril. Roman military culture, steeped in centuries of conquest and hardened brutality, viewed women of royal blood as spoils of war, objects to be paraded, exploited, and humiliated. While a rare few elite prisoners might be spared immediate degradation for ransom or political leverage, most endured treatment indistinguishable from slavery. The theoretical difference between prisoner of war and slave dissolved in practice, leaving queens utterly exposed. This legal and cultural framework set the stage for something far more public and deliberate: the Roman triumph, a spectacle that transformed conquest into theater and shattered the dignity of defeated rulers. Rome did not simply win wars, it displayed victory as a spectacle meant to burn itself into the memory of citizens and enemies alike. When the Senate granted a victorious general a triumph, the city prepared for a grand procession. Streets thronged with citizens as the parade wound through Rome for kilometers, moving at a slow, deliberate pace. Musicians and performers set a rhythmic cadence, while carts carried painted scenes of conquered cities, fallen fortresses, and distant lands now under Roman dominion. Exotic animals dragged in chains from faraway territories were paraded, tangible proof of Rome's reach. Then came the prisoners.
At the heart of the procession walked the captives, shackled, exhausted, exposed to the roar and laughter of the crowd. Captured rulers, especially queens, were placed front and center. They were often forced to wear their royal finery, not as a sign of respect, but as a cruel contrast: silk and jewels shackled with iron chains, power reduced to spectacle. Thousands watched with a mixture of awe, scorn, and triumph. These were no mere prisoners. They were women who once commanded armies, issued laws, and ruled cities. Rome wanted every spectator to see that no crown could protect its bearer. No throne was beyond Roman reach. The journey lasted hours. Every step was meticulously choreographed so that no moment of humiliation passed unseen. Captive queens walked each step with the heavy weight of uncertainty. Would they live on as trophies or die before the day ended? The very unpredictability was punishment, forcing them to endure the procession's slow march while imagining the fate that awaited. For Rome, the triumph fulfilled many purposes. It satisfied a populace hungry for tangible proof of conquest, sent a clear warning to foreign envoys watching in the crowd, and reinforced the empire's internal order by showing that rebellion led not merely to defeat, but to complete public erasure. For the women trapped in these processions, dignity was stripped away before the world. Their bodies became living messages, clearer than any speech or decree. Resistance ended here. Power belonged solely to Rome. No story captures this calculated cruelty more starkly than that of Queen Zenobia of Palmyra. Zenobia was no minor monarch. She carved out an empire stretching from Egypt through Syria and deep into Anatolia, forcing Rome to confront the terrifying possibility of losing its eastern provinces. When Emperor Aurelian crushed her forces in 272 CE and captured her fleeing toward Persia, he recognized the prize he had won. Zenobia was not executed. Instead, she was preserved. 2 years later, in Aurelian's triumph, she became the centerpiece. Ancient accounts describe a procession designed to overwhelm the senses. Sunlight flashed off polished armor, incense filled the air, and at the center walked Zenobia, transformed from empress into exhibit. She was covered in jewels, not as a sign of respect, but to magnify her fall. Gold, emeralds, and pearls turned her into a living display of conquered wealth. But it was the chains that drew every eye. Heavy golden chains bound her wrists and neck, so massive that attendants had to help carry their weight. Rome had turned her own riches into instruments of humiliation. The crowd watched as she walked for hours through hostile streets. Every step reinforced the message: this is what happens to those who defy Rome. Ancient writers note her composure. Despite the weight of the chains and the stares of thousands, Zenobia carried herself with dignity. That defiance may have saved her life. Aurelian, either impressed by her bearing or calculating her value as a living symbol, spared her execution. Instead, she was granted a villa near Rome. She lived out her remaining years under imperial control, her presence itself a reminder of defeat. Some sources claim she married into Roman society, her children absorbed into the aristocracy. Whether this was mercy or more refined humiliation remains unclear. Zenobia survived, but only as proof that even the most powerful queen could be reduced to dependency. Her fate, however, was the exception. For other royal women, Rome's punishment was faster, more brutal, and far less forgiving. In Britain, Rome demonstrated how little mercy royal women could expect once they became inconvenient. When King Prasutagus of the Iceni died, he tried to protect his family by leaving his kingdom jointly to Rome and his daughters. It was a compromise meant to preserve peace. Roman officials ignored it completely. They seized the land, confiscated property, and moved to make an example of the royal household. When Queen Boudica protested, her status meant nothing. She was publicly flogged, a punishment meant to humiliate as much as injure. But the message did not stop with her. Her daughters, young and unprotected, were assaulted by Roman soldiers. Ancient historians did not describe this lightly. Tacitus records these acts as the spark that ignited rebellion, presenting them as violations so severe they shattered any remaining loyalty to Rome. This was not random cruelty. It was deliberate degradation, carried out in public, meant to demonstrate that Roman authority extended even over the bodies of defeated royalty. The strategy failed. Britain erupted. Boudica raised an army that burned Roman cities and slaughtered thousands. But Rome eventually answered with discipline and steel. The rebellion collapsed. Boudica chose death over capture. Her daughters disappear from history, their fate swallowed by silence. For those rulers who survived capture, the end often came after the applause faded. As triumphs concluded, prisoners were led away from cheering crowds to the Mamertine prison beneath the Capitoline Hill. In its lower chamber, hidden from public view, Rome ended the lives of its enemies. Kings were strangled, leaders were starved, some were left to rot in darkness while celebrations continued above. Execution was not rushed. It was another tool, applied when spectacle had served its purpose. Not every captive queen was killed. Some, like Zenobia, were kept alive as symbols. But survival did not mean freedom. It meant living under Roman control, a constant reminder that resistance led not to honor, but to humiliation. These stories reveal how Roman power truly functioned. Law protected citizens and erased enemies. Victory stripped dignity from the defeated and transformed human suffering into political theater. The triumphs praised in ancient texts were built on broken lives, on queens reduced to warnings. The stone walls of Rome's prisons still stand. They remain silent witnesses to an empire that ruled not only through legions, but through fear. For captured queens, defeat meant more than loss of a throne. It meant the deliberate destruction of identity itself.